Hi everyone, it's Laura and I hope you're all doing really well. Today I'm going to be talking through the books that I read last month in April. I only read 4 sort of fiction books that I'm going to talk to you about today. I have been doing a lot of reading, but based on my job, so it's kind of professional reading for an exam that I'm doing probably while this video is out, the first week of May. I've got quite a difficult exam for work, so I've been doing a lot of reading around that and spending some time on that, but still some really interesting books to talk to you about today. The first thing I read was Sight by Jessie Greengrass, which was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction last year. And this is looking at, it jumps around in time and it's about a woman looking at her decision with her partner as to whether or not they should have a baby. But then also in the future, when she's already had that baby, she's thinking about when she lost her mother, motherhood in general. And it's sort of ruminating on all these different thoughts and emotions from her past and her various presents, I suppose, because you're jumping through her timeline. She's also looking back at some historical medical issues such as Freud and the birth of psychoanalysis and the discovery of the X-ray and what that meant about seeing inside yourself, seeing physically inside your body and inside your mind as well. So she's playing with all these sort of various ideas which are all linked under the lovely title of Sight. In terms of her writing, I really liked her style. I loved her ruminating on the concept of motherhood and the idea of her body changing and what that means to bring something of yourself into the world, which is then separate from you. And I liked the juxtaposition of that, looking back at her relationship with her mother and how well she really knew her. She also talks about her grandmother as well, who is a psychoanalyst in this story. I think the only downside for me of this book is that she does jump between concepts quite a lot, and also not consistently. So there'll be a section right at the beginning which is looking at X-rays, and then she starts looking at psychoanalysis, and it almost feels like this would work better as a linked collection of short stories rather than one novel in a way, because that feels like that's how she's approached it. You know, looking back at things like the X-ray, it doesn't go all the way through the book, and it doesn't link back, and considering she's jumping around in terms of time with the plot of her narrator and also these historical concepts as well, I think it almost feels like there's too many different things you're trying to look at, or almost too compartmentalised where she's looking at each thing individually. But apart from that, I did really enjoy it, and she has written a book of short stories which came out before this novel, so I'm really excited to read that now. Next, I read a little known poetry collection. I don't know if you will have heard of the author, and that's The Girl Aquarium by Jen Campbell. And this is quite difficult for me to review this collection because obviously she's my friend, and I think that makes a bit of a different kind of relationship to the work. And also because some of these poems I know quite well or have heard before, and some of them were completely new to me. And as somebody who, hand on heart, will tell you I'm not the best at reading poetry. I don't always gel with poetry. I find it more difficult to read and get something from than prose. I think it's quite interesting that the poems I've heard before or have read before I really enjoyed in this collection, and I think it just shows it depends how you hear it or how many times perhaps you read it, you get something different from a poem. If you're familiar with Jen's work previously and her book of short stories, etc., then you will not be surprised by the themes that come up in this collection, such as LGBT identity, bodily difference, growing up, the experience of growing up as a girl and your body changing, and also fairy tales as well. I tend to be drawn more to the longer form poems in Jen's work and ones that are closer to prose, just because for me, that's how best I think I interact with the genre. And one of my favourite poems in here is the title poem, The Girl Aquarium, which is about this sort of odd world where girls with strange and different bodies are all on display and everybody's coming in and looking at them. And it's quite ghastly and gruesome, really, the way it's described in this alternative universe where these strange girls with different types of bodies are all swimming around in front of the general public. And it's kind of a comment on the freak show as well as the idea of women's bodies being on display. And my other favourite poem is Hello Dark, which I have loved for a while anyway, and that's about the concept of going blind, which I find quite emotional and evocative as I read it. I'm not going to say too much more about this collection because I feel like it's very difficult to not give a biased opinion, I think, in terms of the writing, because I like Jen's writing and I like hearing her read, and you know, I think I'm not in an objective position to talk about the collection necessarily, but I did really enjoy it. It's out now, just last week this came out. So if you're a fan of Jen's writing, if you're a fan of Jen's channel, I would highly recommend giving this one a go. I have 2 more books to talk about. One of them I absolutely loved, and the other one was a bit of a disappointment, so I'm not sure which one to do first. I think we'll go with the disappointment, also because it matches my outfit, and that's a very nice tableau. That's Ordinary People by Diana Evans. The reason I was disappointed in this is because I've heard so many amazing things about it. Lauren from Lauren in the Books really likes it, and I trust her opinion. Normally I trust her opinion. And it's been longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction as well. This is about 2 young couples who are living in London, or from London, on the outskirts of London, who both have young children and are essentially on the brink of divorce or separation. They are very unhappy as couples, and you weave through their lives how they know each other, their pasts, how they met each other, how they work as a foursome and as couples as well. And it's sort of just looking at, I guess, identity and how they've lost that to the marriage and want to get out. I mean, I found it very pessimistic as someone who's just got married. I was literally like, Will, what have we done? Marriage is awful. However, despite everyone in it being essentially miserable, I did actually like, as characters, I found them very interesting, and I really liked the dynamics between them. I thought they were very well written. As people, I thought they were completely three-dimensional, believable. They all had different depths, and you could really understand why they were unhappy with each other. You just kind of wanted them to talk to each other, but you understood kind of how they'd got into that situation. So from a personality perspective, a character perspective, I did enjoy this book. I don't think, aside from that, I really liked Diana Evans's writing. I thought it was quite crowded. I thought she was using lots of metaphors for seemingly no reason. There's a lot of focusing on the Crystal Palace in London and how that kind of had a fire and burnt down, which, metaphor for a marriage, it used to be beautiful and now it's not. There's a big focus on John Legend and his album and the song Ordinary People from that album, and it goes through really so much detail track by track about how this album could be like this guy's life. And there's also a bit of an odd part where one of the women feels like her daughter might be possessed, or she thinks like the house has got a curse on it or something, and that element kind of gets worse and worse and worse and quite bizarre. But again, that just feels like completely separate. And you know, you're looking at it as a metaphor because she feels trapped in the house. When she was just focusing on these 4 characters, I felt like there was some good stuff going on. And I finished the book, you know, I didn't, even though I wasn't enjoying some aspects of it, I still wanted to know what was going to happen between the couples. So, you know, there's a lot to be said for it. I don't know if it's a structural problem or if it's all her writing, like not, perhaps editing, like not kind of knowing what bits are the important bits. Like there's even a point where one of the women, Melissa, is having lunch with her friend, and she goes into quite a bit of detail about what they're having for lunch. And I was just thinking, like, I don't need like the menu of Wagamama's. I don't see how that's important to know exactly what they're having for lunch. So I think, you know, I didn't quite gel with her writing as it is in this book. But there were some other really redeemable, for me, aspects of it. And as I said, I know other people who really, really enjoyed it. I just think it probably wasn't for me. So I'd love to hear from you if you've read it or if you've got any other opinions on it. Like I'm just quite bemused by it. And finally, hey, a book I knew I was going to love, and then obviously I loved, and that's Spring by Ali Smith. If you don't know, Ali Smith is doing a quartet of different books, one a year, and each of them is in a different season. And they're quite difficult books to talk about, or at least review if you haven't read any of them yet, because each of the stories are completely standalone. They don't follow on, but they are about the year they were written. So she's talking about the now. So although you're following different characters, like you could just read Spring and have never read Autumn or Winter, that's completely fine. But if you do read them in order, you can really see what she's doing in terms of like the climate, the political climate, like how people are feeling, what's going on in the world each year. So Autumn really focused on Brexit, on the Brexit vote, and Spring, I mean, in terms of characters, we're looking at a man whose friend has died, and he used to be a TV director, producer, and he's kind of looking back on his relationship with his friend and feeling quite distraught and looking towards the past. There's a woman who works in a detention centre, like where immigrants in the UK are sent before being sent abroad or whatever, or going to court, or whatever's going on there. But it's less about them specifically and more about the situations they find themselves in and their views depending on, you know, where they are in society. I think she's looking at the idea of truth and facts and fake news, the concept of personhood and othering somebody else, and also the idea of community and helping people, and sort of who has a right to be helped and who has a right to the truth. I mean, these are just things that I'm getting from it. Like, basically, I feel like I'm just spouting words, which almost have no conjunction to this book because it is so layered. As a book itself, she's kind of covering the whole of last year, if you like, but from a very philosophical standpoint. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend this to you if you know already you don't really get on with Ali Smith, because she is an acquired taste. But if you do, or you don't know yet, perhaps you just want to try her out, I would thoroughly recommend this, but more than that, the whole trilogy as it currently stands, of these books, because I think with each volume that comes out, I just appreciate and admire and I just love it even more. So I'm sure I've done a very poor job of explaining all of the contents of this book, but I would still highly recommend you giving it a go. So that was my April. I hope you all had a good reading month as well. Let me know in the comments below what you've been reading. And also, if you've read any of these 4 books, I'd love to continue chatting with you about them. I'm really looking forward to May. I'm really looking forward to this sort of exam at work being out of my way and just being able to relax and read whatever I want and just focus on some different things for once. So ideally, that would mean I would have more time to read some more interesting books and make some more videos for you, which means everyone's a winner. So hurrah for May. Hooray for May. Oh gosh, that would have been much better. And I will see you in my next video. Bye.